The Texas sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil, turning the air thick and hard to breathe. Elena Cross pressed her gloved hand against the stagecoach window, watching the landscape roll past. Endless stretches of brown grass, twisted mesquite trees, and dirt that looked like it hadn't seen rain in months. She'd been traveling for 3 weeks, each day taking her further from everything she'd known and closer to a future she could barely imagine. The other passengers had long since given up trying to make conversation with her. She wasn't unfriendly, exactly, just contained, self-sufficient. A woman traveling alone to marry a man she'd never met wasn't the kind of person who invited casual chit-chat. The elderly woman across from her had tried, once, asking if she was nervous about meeting her intended. Elena had smiled politely and said, "No more than seems reasonable," and that had been the end of it. Truth was, she'd been nervous 3 weeks ago. Now she was just tired. The letter in her reticule had been read so many times the creases were starting to tear. Miss Cross, I am in need of a wife. My homestead is modest but productive, 40 acres with a house, barn, and good water. I am a widower, no children, aged 32. I work hard and expect the same. If you are of good character and sound health, I believe we could make a practical arrangement. Yours, Rowan Hale. Practical. That word had sold her more than anything else in the letter. Not love, not romance, not promises of happiness, just practical. She could work with practical. She'd been doing it her whole life. The stagecoach hit a rut, and everyone lurched sideways. Someone's trunk slid across the floor with a screech. The driver shouted something incomprehensible, and the horses whinnied in protest. Elena caught herself against the window frame and straightened her hat. "Another hour," the driver had said at the last stop. Another hour, and she'd be there. She tried to picture Rowan Hale from his letter. The handwriting had been careful, almost deliberate, like a man who'd learned to write later in life and hadn't quite gotten comfortable with it. He hadn't included a photograph, and she hadn't asked for one. What would have been the point? She was going either way. Her own letter back had been equally brief. "Mr. Hale, I accept your proposal. I am 26 years of age, in good health, capable of hard work. I have some funds saved and can contribute to the household. I will arrive on the 15th of September. Respectfully, Elena Cross." She hadn't mentioned how much she had saved. That seemed like the kind of detail that would only complicate things. The stagecoach began to slow. Elena leaned forward, peering through the dust-streaked window. They were approaching what might generously be called a town. A handful of buildings clustered around a dirt crossroads, a general store with a sagging porch, a saloon, a building that might have been a boarding house. A sign proclaimed it Harlo's Pass, population unspecified. The stage rolled to a stop in front of the general store. The driver climbed down, his boots hitting the ground with a heavy thud. "Harlo's Pass, 20-minute rest, folks. Stretch your legs if you're continuing on." Elena gathered her things, a carpet bag and a small trunk that the driver would have to haul down. She'd left most of her possessions behind in St. Louis, bringing only what was essential. A fresh start didn't need the weight of the past dragging behind it. She stepped down carefully, her traveling dress dusty despite her best efforts to stay clean. The heat hit her immediately, dry and relentless. A few locals had gathered to watch the stage arrive, probably the most exciting thing that would happen all week. An old man sat in a rocking chair on the store's porch, whittling something. A woman with a baby on her hip stood in the doorway, squinting against the sun. "Excuse me," Elena said, approaching the woman. "I'm looking for Rowan Hale's homestead. Can you direct me?" The woman's expression shifted, something Elena couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or concern. "Hale's place? You sure about that, miss?" "I'm certain. He's expecting me." The woman glanced at the old man who'd stopped whittling. They exchanged a look that made Elena's stomach tighten. "What is it?" Elena asked, keeping her voice level. "You family?" the old man asked. "I'm his fiancé." That got a reaction. The woman's eyes widened. "Lord have mercy! You came all this way, and nobody told you?" Elena's hand tightened on her carpet bag. "Told me what?" The old man set down his whittling and stood slowly, like his joints hurt. "Hale's place burned down. 3 weeks back, maybe 4. Whole thing went up. House, barn, everything." The words took a moment to register. Elena felt the ground shift slightly under her feet, though she knew it was just exhaustion and shock playing tricks. "Burned?" Lightning strike, the woman said. Started in the barn, spread to the house before anybody could do anything. It's all gone, miss. Just ash and charred timber now. Elena's mind raced, trying to process this. And Mr. Hale, is he alive yet? The old man said. Barely. Got hurt trying to save his horses. Lost one of them anyway. He's been living rough ever since, camping on his own land like some kind of hermit. The woman stepped closer, her voice gentle. Miss, I don't know what arrangements you had with Rowan, but there's nothing out there now. No house, no comfort, nothing. You might want to take the next stage back to wherever you came from. Elena stood very still, letting the information settle. 3 weeks ago. The fire had happened 3 weeks ago, right around the time she'd left St. Louis. She'd been on trains and stages, moving steadily toward a future that had literally gone up in smoke before she even left home. How far is it? She asked. To his property. About 4 miles west, the old man said. But, miss? I'd like to borrow a horse, if one's available. I can pay. The woman frowned. Did you hear what we said? There's nothing there. I heard you. Elena met her eyes steadily. I'd still like to go. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then the woman sighed and called over her shoulder. Jimmy, get the mare ready for this young lady. A boy of about 14 appeared from inside the store, looking curious. Yes, Mama? Saddle up, Bess. The lady needs to ride out to the Hale place. Jimmy's eyebrows shot up. The burned out. Just do it, please. While they waited for the horse, Elena retrieved her trunk from the stagecoach. The driver looked at her like she was crazy when she told him she wasn't continuing on. You sure about that, miss? Next stage won't be through for a week. I'm sure. The stage pulled out, leaving her standing in the dust with her trunk and carpet bag. The woman, she'd introduced herself as Mrs. Carson, brought her a canteen of water and a wrapped package. Some bread and cheese. You'll need something to eat. Thank you. I'll return your horse tomorrow. Keep her as long as you need, just... Mrs. Carson hesitated. Rowan Hale was a decent man before, hard worker, kept to himself, but he's been through something terrible, and men don't always come back right from that kind of thing. Don't expect him to be what you thought he'd be. Elena nodded. I won't. Jimmy brought the horse around, a sturdy-looking mare with kind eyes. He helped Elena secure her trunk behind the saddle and showed her how to adjust the stirrups. She'd ridden before, though not often. It would come back to her. Follow the main road west, Jimmy said. You'll see a split oak tree about 3 miles out. Turn north there, follow the creek. His property starts where the creek bends east. Thank you. She mounted carefully, settling into the saddle. The mare shifted but didn't fuss. Mrs. Carson stood with her arms crossed, watching with worried eyes. You're a braver woman than me, miss. Or a more foolish one, Elena said. I'll know which soon enough. She urged the mare forward, and Harlo's pass fell away behind her. The ride was longer than 4 miles in the heat. The sun seemed to press down from above, while the earth reflected it back up, trapping her in between. Elena's dress clung to her back with sweat, and dust coated her throat despite the water from the canteen. The landscape was harsh, but not without beauty, the way the light caught on the silvery leaves of the sage, the distant purple smudge of hills on the horizon, the absolute vastness of the sky. She found the split oak tree exactly where Jimmy said it would be. The creek was little more than a trickle at this time of year, but it was still water, still life. She followed it north, watching for the bend. When she saw the smoke, her heart sank even though she'd been expecting it. Not fresh smoke, just the ghost of it, a gray haze hanging over what had once been a homestead. She could smell it before she saw the ruins, that particular scent of burned wood that never quite goes away. The mare balked as they approached, nervous about the smell. Elena dismounted and led her on foot, speaking softly. Easy, girl. It's all right. It wasn't all right. Nothing about this was all right. The house had been modest, she could tell from the foundation, maybe 3 or 4 rooms. Now it was just blackened posts jutting up from scorched earth, like broken teeth. The barn was worse, completely collapsed in on itself. Tools and equipment lay scattered around the property. Some burned beyond recognition, others salvageable, but abandoned. A water trough sat untouched, somehow spared, half full of water gone green with algae. And in the middle of it all, sitting on a charred beam with his head in his hands, was a man. Elena tied the mare to what was left of a fence post and approached slowly. Her boots crunched on debris, nails, broken glass, things she couldn't identify. He heard her coming, his head jerked up, and she got her first look at Rowan Hale. Mrs. Carson had said he'd been hurt. That was an understatement. The left side of his face was a mass of healing burns, angry red, and still raw-looking in places. His hair, dark and unkempt, was singed short on that side. His hands, when he raised them, were wrapped in dirty bandages. He wore clothes that had been patched and repatched, covered in soot and dirt. But it was his eyes that stopped her. They were blue, startlingly so against his damaged skin, and they looked right through her with an expression that was equal parts shock and fury. "What the hell are you doing here?" His voice was rough, like it hurt to talk. Elena stopped a few feet away, keeping her hands visible and her posture non-threatening. "Mr. Hale, I'm Elena Cross." He stared at her. "That name's supposed to mean something to me?" "You wrote to me 3 months ago. You proposed marriage, and I accepted." For a moment he didn't move. Then he started to laugh, a harsh, bitter sound that had nothing to do with humor. "Jesus Christ, you actually came. You were expecting me." "I was expecting a lot of things. Then my barn got struck by lightning and my whole goddamn life burned down." He stood up abruptly, and she saw he was tall, probably 6 feet, though he held himself like something hurt. "So whatever arrangement you thought we had, it's done. Finished. Turn around and go back to wherever you came from." "St. Louis." "I don't care if you came from the moon. There's nothing here for you. Look around." He gestured at the ruins with one bandaged hand. "Does this look like a home to you? Does this look like someplace a woman could live?" Elena did look around, slowly and deliberately. She saw the water source. The creek was reliable even in dry season. She saw cleared land that could be planted. She saw timber in the distance that could be cut. She saw a possibility where he saw only ash. "It could be," she said quietly. "What?" "It could be someplace a woman could live. With work." He was staring at her like she'd sprouted a second head. "Are you out of your mind? There's no house, no barn, no furniture, no supplies, nothing. I'm sleeping in a goddamn tent made from a burned tarp. I cook over an open fire when I bother to cook at all. I've got $19 to my name and credit at the general store I'll never be able to pay back. This isn't a homestead, lady. It's a disaster." "I can see that. Then why are you still standing here?" Elena met his eyes. "Because I came a long way, Mr. Hale, and I don't have anywhere else to go." That stopped him. He stood there, breathing hard, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in every line of his body, the way he favored his left side, the tremor in his burned hands. "What happened to you?" he finally asked. "That you'd come all this way to marry a stranger and then look at this and not run?" "The same thing that happened to most people," Elena said. "Life." They stood in silence, the wind picking up and scattering ash around their feet. A crow called from somewhere in the distance, harsh and mocking. "You should go," Rowan said, but there was less force behind it now. "I've got nothing to offer you. Hell, I can barely keep myself alive out here." "Then you could probably use some help." "I'm not your charity case." "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a partnership. That's what a marriage is, isn't it? Or what it should be." He laughed again, that same bitter sound. "Partnership. Right. What exactly would you be bringing to this partnership? Because I've got nothing but debt and ash." Elena took a breath. This was where it could all fall apart, but she'd learned that sometimes you had to take a risk. "I have money, not a fortune, but enough. Enough to buy supplies, enough to rebuild." His expression shuddered immediately. "No." "Mr. Hale, I said no. I don't need your money. I don't need you here feeling sorry for me, thinking you can fix everything with a few dollars. I can do this myself." "Can you?" Elena gestured at the ruins, at him. "Because it looks to me like you're barely surviving. When was the last time you had a proper meal? When was the last time you changed those bandages? That's none of your business. It is if we're going to be married. We're not." He turned away from her, heading toward what looked like a makeshift camp near the creek. "Go away, Miss Cross. Go back to street, Louis, and your comfortable life, and find some other fool to marry." Elena stood her ground. "No." He stopped walking. Slowly, he turned back around. What did you say? I said no. I'm not leaving. I could make you leave. You could try. She kept her voice level, calm. But you're hurt and exhausted, and I don't think you're the kind of man who'd force a woman off his property. Besides, where would I go? It's 4 miles back to town, and it'll be dark soon. Even if I made it back, the next stage won't come for a week. Mrs. Carson might let me stay at the boarding house, but I'd have to pay for it, and I'd rather spend my money on something useful. Like rebuilding a burned-out homestead for a man who doesn't want you here? Exactly like that. Rowan stared at her for a long moment. She could see him working through the logic, trying to find a hole in her argument. Finally, he shook his head. You're insane. Possibly. This won't work. It might. I don't want a wife. Then think of me as a business partner or hired help if that's easier. He ran a hand through his singed hair, wincing when he touched the burned side. Jesus. You don't give up, do you? Not when I've made up my mind about something. Another long silence. Elena watched emotions play across his damaged face. Anger, frustration, exhaustion, and underneath it all, something that might have been hope, though he was fighting hard to suppress it. One night, he finally said. You can stay one night. In the morning, you get back on that horse and go back to town. Understood? It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no either. Elena nodded. Understood. And don't expect me to make conversation. I'm not fit company for anyone right now. I'm not here for conversation. He grunted and turned back toward his camp. After a moment, Elena followed, leading the mare behind her. His camp was exactly as miserable as he'd described it. A tarp stretched between 2 half-burned posts created a lean-to barely big enough for one person. A fire ring made of stones sat in the middle of a cleared area, currently cold. A few supplies were stacked in a wooden crate covered with canvas, flour, coffee, some canned goods. A bedroll that had seen better days lay on the ground under the tarp. Rowan stood awkwardly at the edge of the camp, like he wasn't sure what to do with a visitor. I've got no place for you to sleep except the ground, and no food worth eating. I brought some. Elena retrieved the package from Mrs. Carson and held it up. Bread and cheese, and I saw some of your chickens on the way in. Looks like a few survived. Do you have eggs? A few. They're half wild now, though. Hard to catch. We'll manage. She looked around, assessing. Do you have another tarp? Or spare canvas? Why? Because if I'm staying even one night, I need somewhere to sleep and I'm not taking your shelter, so we'll need to make another one. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he was too tired. There's some canvas in the barn, or what's left of it. Might be salvageable. I'll look. You should sit down. You're swaying on your feet. I'm fine. You're not. Sit. To her surprise, he did. He lowered himself onto a log near the fire ring with a grimace that told her exactly how much pain he was in. She'd seen that kind of careful movement before. People who'd been hurt and weren't healing right because they wouldn't stop moving long enough to let their bodies recover. Elena tied the mare securely and went to investigate the barn ruins. It was dangerous work. She had to watch every step for nails and sharp metal, and the collapsed timbers shifted under her weight. But she found what she needed, a section of canvas that had been protected from the worst of the fire, and some rope that was singed but still strong. By the time she carried it back, Rowan had started a fire. He was blowing on the kindling, coaxing flames to life with the focused intensity of someone who'd done this too many times. When it caught, he sat back with a small grunt of satisfaction. Found canvas, Elena said. Help me set it up? He looked like he wanted to refuse, but practicality won out. Together they rigged a second lean-to a respectful distance from his. It wasn't pretty, but it would keep the dew off and provide some privacy. Elena spread out her bedroll, significantly nicer than his, she noticed with a pang, and set her carpetbag inside. When she came back to the fire, he was staring at the flames with an expression that was hard to read. She unwrapped the bread and cheese and divided it, handing him a portion. He took it without comment and ate mechanically, like someone who'd forgotten food was supposed to taste like anything. Elena ate her own portion slowly, thinking. The silence between them wasn't exactly comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of two people too tired to perform for each other. Can I ask what happened? She finally said. The night of the fire? He didn't answer for a long time. She thought maybe he wasn't going to, but then he spoke, his voice flat and distant. Lightning hit the barn around midnight. I woke up to the horses screaming. By the time I got out there, the whole thing was engulfed. I got the door open, got one horse out, went back for the other. He held up his bandaged hands. Beam fell, caught me on the way out. Horse panicked, kicked me, ran back into the fire. Elena felt something twist in her chest. I'm sorry. I laid there in the dirt, watching my barn burn. Then sparks caught the house. I tried to fight it with water from the creek, but... He gestured at the ruins. Fire doesn't give a damn about effort. It just takes what it wants. Were you insured? Couldn't afford it. He laughed bitterly. Couldn't afford a lot of things, but I was making it work, slowly, and then in one night, he snapped his fingers. Gone. Your hands, Elena said carefully. Have they been seen by a doctor? Doc Patterson in town wrapped them, gave me some salve, said they'd heal or they wouldn't. He flexed his fingers slightly. They're healing, mostly. The scars won't ever go away, though. Scars don't make you less capable. He turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time. You say that like you know something about it. Elena met his eyes. Everyone's got scars, Mr. Hale. Not all of them show on the outside. Something passed between them then. A moment of recognition, maybe. Two people who'd both been through something and come out damaged. Why'd you come here? He asked. Really? You could have gone anywhere, done anything. Why answer a letter from a stranger in Texas? Elena poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks spiral up into the darkening sky. Because anywhere else, I'd still be Elena Cross, the woman whose father drank himself to death and whose mother worked her fingers to the bone in a laundry to make ends meet. The woman who spent 10 years as a governess in other people's homes, taking care of other people's children, never having anything of her own. She looked up at him. Out here, I could be someone different, someone who built something from nothing. I thought that was worth the risk. And now, knowing what you're walking into? Now, she smiled slightly. I still think it's worth the risk. Rowan shook his head slowly. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the craziest. Can't I be both? That surprised a laugh out of him, a real one this time, short but genuine. It transformed his face for a moment, let her see past the burns and the exhaustion to the man underneath. He'd been handsome once, she thought. Strong features, good bone structure. He still was really in a rough, damaged sort of way. The laugh faded and he looked away. You should know, Miss Cross, I'm not what you'd call a sociable man even on good days. I don't talk much. Don't know how to be what a husband's supposed to be. My first wife... He trailed off, his jaw tightening. You don't have to... She left me after 2 years, said living with me was like living with a stone wall. Said I was cold, unfeeling. Said she felt more alone married to me than she did before. He stirred the fire roughly. She wasn't wrong. Elena considered that. Did you love her? I thought I did. But looking back, I think I just needed help with the homestead, and she needed security. We made each other miserable trying to be something neither of us actually wanted. Then maybe, Elena said carefully, we have an advantage. We both know this is practical, not romantic. We're not expecting poetry and passion, just partnership. Partnership. He tested the word. You keep saying that. Because it's true. You need help rebuilding. I need... She paused, choosing her words. A place to belong to, something that's mine, ours. We can help each other. Using your money. There it was, the pride. Elena had known it would be an issue. Using whatever resources we have. You have land, knowledge, skills. I have money. We each bring something to the table. It's not equal. Nothing ever is. But it doesn't have to be exactly equal to be fair. He was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. The flames cast shifting shadows across his scarred face. Finally, he sighed. You're making it hard to send you away. Good, that's the idea. I'm not promising anything. You stay, we try this, and if it doesn't work, then we'll figure that out when we come to it. Elena stood, brushing off her skirt. But I think we should at least give it a real chance. And that means tomorrow, we start planning the rebuild. Tomorrow, you're supposed to ride back to town. I've changed my mind about that. Miss Cross, Elena, if we're going to be partners, you should use my name. He looked up at her, something complicated crossing his face. Rowan, he said finally. My name is Rowan. Nice to meet you, Rowan. She extended her hand. He stared at it for a moment, then reached out and took it with his bandaged one. His grip was careful but firm, and the gesture felt more significant than a simple handshake should. You're going to regret this, he said. Maybe, but I don't think so. That night, lying on her bedroll under the canvas shelter, Elena stared up at the stars visible through a gap in the tarp. She could hear the creek bubbling nearby, the occasional rustle of night creatures moving through the brush, and across the camp, the sound of Rowan's restless turning. She'd meant what she said. She didn't have anywhere else to go. But it was more than that. Looking at these ruins, at this broken man trying to survive on pride and stubbornness alone, she'd felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. In St. Louis, she'd been drifting, going through motions, existing but not living. Here, even in the middle of disaster, there was possibility. There was something to build toward. And if she was being honest with herself, there was something else too. When Rowan had looked at her across the fire, when he'd told her about his failed marriage and his fears about being cold and unfeeling, she'd seen the truth he couldn't see about himself. He wasn't unfeeling. He felt too much, and it scared him, so he locked it all down behind walls of silence and distance. She understood that. She'd done the same thing herself for years. Maybe that's why she was staying. Not because she thought she could fix him. People couldn't be fixed like broken fences. But because she recognized something of herself in him, and she thought maybe, working side by side toward a common goal, they might both find their way to something better than just survival. Across the camp, Rowan's restless sounds finally settled. Elena closed her eyes and let the sounds of the Texas night lull her toward sleep. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow, they'd start building something from the ashes. She just hoped neither of them got burned in the process. Dawn came too early and too bright. Elena woke to the sound of metal scraping against stone, a rhythmic, determined sound that pulled her from sleep like a rope dragging her up from deep water. She sat up, disoriented for a moment, then remembered where she was. The canvas shelter, the ruins, Rowan. She emerged from her lean-to to find him already working. He dragged a twisted sheet of metal from the barn wreckage and was trying to straighten it using a rock as a hammer. His movements were awkward, hindered by his bandaged hands, and she could see the frustration in every swing. "Morning," she said. He grunted without looking up. Not hostile, just focused. She took that as progress. Elena walked down to the creek to wash her face and hands. The water was cold and clear, and it shocked the last of the sleep from her mind. When she came back, Rowan had given up on the metal and was standing in the middle of the burned-out house foundation, just staring at it. "What are you thinking?" she asked. That I should have built it bigger the first time, stronger foundation, better materials. He kicked at a charred beam. All the mistakes are so damn obvious now. That's always how it works. But you get to do it better this time. He finally looked at her. "With your money." There was that pride again, sharp as broken glass. Elena chose her words carefully. "With resources we pool together. I have money, you have land and knowledge. That's the arrangement." "It doesn't feel like an arrangement. It feels like charity." "Then let's make it official." Elena pulled a small notebook and pencil from her carpet bag. She'd brought it for recording household expenses, but it would work for this too. "We'll write up an agreement, partners in rebuilding this homestead. We each contribute what we have, we each do the work, and when it's done, it belongs to both of us equally." "You want a contract?" "I want us both to be clear about what this is. No charity, no debt, just partnership." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, let's write it down." They sat on the log by the cold fire pit, and Elena wrote as they talked through it. It was awkward at first. Rowan kept trying to promise more than was reasonable, to somehow balance the scales by committing to impossible amounts of work. Elena pushed back, insisting on realistic terms. They argued over details, crossed out lines, started over twice. "You'll keep doing that," Rowan said, watching her rewrite a section for the third time. "Making everything fair even when it isn't." "It is fair. You're bringing years of farming knowledge I don't have. That's worth more than money in the long run. Money builds houses, knowledge doesn't. Knowledge keeps them standing after they're built. She finished writing and held it out to him. Read it. If you agree, we both sign. He read slowly, his lips moving slightly. She realized he probably didn't read much, not because he couldn't, but because there'd never been much reason to out here. When he finished, he looked up at her. This really what you want? To tie yourself to a burned-out homestead and a man who can't even hold a hammer right anymore? Your hands will heal, and yes, this is what I want. He pulled the pencil from behind her ear, a gesture so casual and unexpected that it startled them both. But he recovered quickly, signing his name at the bottom in that same careful, deliberate handwriting she remembered from his letter. Then he handed the pencil back to her. Elena signed her name below his. Elena Cross. She stared at it for a moment, this strange new partnership written out in graphite and bound by nothing but 2 signatures and stubborn determination. There, she said. Now it's official. We're business partners. Business partners, he repeated. Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or resignation. Never thought I'd enter into a business partnership like this. Neither did I, but here we are. She stood, tucking the notebook away. So, partner, what do we do first? The first thing, it turned out, was inventory. Rowan showed her around the property, cataloging what had survived and what was lost. It was depressing work. Most of his tools had been in the barn, ruined. His plow, his cultivator, his carpentry equipment, all gone or damaged beyond repair. The chickens had survived, though they were skittish and scattered. A milk cow had been at a neighbor's place during the fire, so at least they'd have dairy once they retrieved her. We'll need to go into town, Elena said, mentally calculating costs. Get supplies, order lumber, hire help if we can find it. Can't afford help. We can afford some. Not a crew, but maybe 1 or 2 men for the heavy work. Your hands aren't ready for framing, and I'm stronger than I look, but not that strong. He wanted to argue. She could see it in the set of his jaw. But he knew she was right. Fine, but I'm not sitting around while other men do my work. Nobody said you would be. There's plenty that needs doing besides framing. They rode into town together that afternoon, Elena on Mrs. Carson's mare, and Rowan on a horse he'd borrowed from a neighbor. The ride was mostly silent, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Less hostile, more companionable. They were both too tired and too focused on the tasks ahead to waste energy on conversation. Harlo's pass looked different in full daylight, smaller somehow, and more worn. But the general store was well stocked, and the proprietor, a man named Gaines, greeted them with cautious curiosity. Rowan, didn't expect to see you in town today. His eyes shifted to Elena. This the lady from yesterday. Elena Cross, she said, extending her hand. Mr. Hale's fiancée. Gaines. He shook her hand, his grip brief and formal. So you're staying, then? I'm staying. Well, Gaines looked between them. That's good. Good. Rowan could use the help. He lowered his voice slightly. How are the hands? Healing, Rowan said shortly. We need supplies. Lumber, nails, tools. I'll make a list. They spent 2 hours in that store, going through everything they'd need to rebuild. Elena watched Rowan's face grow tighter and tighter as the cost mounted. When Gaines tallied it up, the number made even her wince. That's substantial, Gaines said diplomatically. I can extend credit on some of it, Rowan, but not all. Not after... He stopped himself. Not after you already extended credit for the doctor and the supplies I got on credit before the fire, Rowan finished. I know. It's fine. He turned to Elena. How much can you cover? This was the moment. Elena could feel the weight of it. She pulled out her purse and counted bills onto the counter, more than enough to cover the supplies, with plenty left over. Gaines's eyebrows rose. Rowan's face went very still. That should cover it, she said calmly. And we'll need the lumber delivered as soon as possible. Yes, ma'am. I can have it out by the end of the week. Good. Thank you, Mr. Gaines. They loaded what they could carry onto the horses and arranged for the rest to be delivered. When they stepped back outside, Rowan was rigid as a fence post. That was more than some funds saved, he said, his voice low. I had a good position in St. Louis. I saved carefully. Elena. He stopped walking, forcing her to stop too. How much do you have? Really? She met his eyes. Enough. That's all you need to know right now. That's not... It's exactly how it needs to be. We agreed on a partnership. I contribute resources, you contribute knowledge and work. The specific numbers don't matter. They matter to me. Why? Because you're afraid of being in debt to me. We already settled that. This isn't debt, it's investment. She softened her tone slightly. Rowan, I'm not trying to buy you or control you. I'm trying to build something with you. Can't you see the difference? He looked away, his jaw working. It's hard for me. Accepting help. Always has been. I know, but you're going to have to learn because I'm not going anywhere and I'm not going to pretend to be poor just to protect your pride. That got his attention. He almost smiled. You don't pull punches, do you? Never saw the point. Life's too short for dancing around things. He studied her for a moment, then shook his head slowly. You're something else, Elena Cross. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Haven't decided yet. They rode back to the homestead as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. The ruins looked even sadder in the golden light, but Elena tried to see past them to what could be. A house, a barn, fields planted and producing. A life. When they dismounted, Rowan stood looking at the foundation of the old house. I've been thinking, he said, about the layout. We should build the house on higher ground, away from the creek. Better drainage, less risk of flooding in spring, and bigger, 4 rooms instead of 3. Kitchen separate from the living area. That sounds good. What about the barn? Same spot, but reinforce it. Stone foundation instead of wood posts. Costs more up front, but it'll last. He was warming to the topic now, the planning giving him something to focus on besides his wounded pride. We'll need to clear more land, too. Another acre, maybe 2. Plant winter wheat. Get a crop in before spring. Can we manage that with just the 2 of us? If we hire help for the building, we can focus on the land work. It'll be tight, but possible. They talked through the evening, sketching plans in the dirt with sticks, arguing over details, compromising. Elena found herself enjoying it. The collaboration, the problem-solving, the sense that they were building something together, rather than just occupying the same space. When darkness fell, they made a simple dinner of beans and cornbread. Rowan's cooking was basic but edible. Elena made a mental note to take over kitchen duties when they had a proper kitchen again. Can I ask you something? Rowan said, breaking a comfortable silence. Of course. Why aren't you married already? Woman like you, smart, capable, not hard to look at. Seems like you would have had chances. Elena poked at the fire. I had chances. I said no. Why? Because they all wanted something I couldn't give. They wanted softness, compliance, someone who'd make their lives easier without complicating anything. And I'm not that. I never have been. She looked up at him. I'm difficult. I have opinions. I don't take orders well. Most men found that off-putting, their loss. The words were simple, but something in his tone made her chest tighten. What about you? She asked. After your wife left, why didn't you remarry? A homestead this size needs more than one person. Tried. Courted a woman in town for a while, a couple years back, Sarah Meadows. Nice enough. But every time I thought about asking her to marry me, I just couldn't. Felt like I'd be trapping her in the same misery my first wife had. Maybe it would have been different. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just not built for marriage. He flexed his bandaged hands absently. I'm not good at the soft things, the talking, the comfort, all that. I work hard, and I'm honest, and I'll provide if I can, but beyond that, he shrugged. That's all I've got. That might be enough, Elena said quietly. For the right person. He looked at her across the fire, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. They were both damaged goods in their own ways, both convinced they were too difficult, or too cold or too broken for the kind of partnership other people seem to find so easily. Maybe that's why this arrangement made sense. Neither of them was expecting perfection from the other. Tut. The lumber arrived 3 days later, along with the tools and supplies. 2 men from town delivered it, the Carsons' son Jimmy and a quiet man named Thomas who seemed to be about Rowan's age. They helped unload everything, stacking it carefully away from where the house would be built. "Mr. Hale," Thomas said when they'd finished, "I heard you might be looking for some help with the building. I'm available if you're hiring. I've done framing work before, helped build 3 barns and a church." Rowan glanced at Elena. She gave a slight nod. "What's your rate?" Rowan asked. $2 a day, or I'll work for materials. I need lumber for my own place, and I figure we could trade labor." "Deal. Can you start tomorrow?" "Yes, sir." After they left, Elena found Rowan standing at the building site, staring at the lumber like he wasn't quite sure what to do with it now that it was here. "You know how to frame a house?" she asked. "Helped with my father's barn when I was 14. Been 20 years, might be rusty." "Then it's good we have Thomas." He nodded slowly. Yeah, it is." He turned to look at her. "You picked up on that, didn't you? That he needed the work as much as we needed the help?" "I grew up poor, Rowan. I recognize it in others." "Is that why you didn't blink at his rate?" "It's low. Too low, really. It's what he could ask without feeling like he was begging. And the trade for lumber means he keeps his dignity. Sometimes that's worth more than fair wages." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "You see things clearly. I like that about you." It was maybe the first straightforward compliment he'd given her. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you." "Don't let it go to your head. I'm not much for flattery." "I noticed." They worked until dark that night, clearing the building site of debris and rocks, leveling the ground as much as they could. It was hard work, made harder by Rowan's injured hands and Elena's lack of experience with this kind of labor. By the time they stopped, Elena's back ached and her palms were blistered despite her gloves. "You should rest tomorrow," Rowan said, noticing her wince as she flexed her hands. "Let me and Thomas handle the heavy work." "I'm fine. You're blistered. No shame in taking a day to recover." "If I rest every time something hurts, nothing will ever get done." She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "I'll work, just maybe not on the framing. I can handle other things. Cooking, fetching water, organizing supplies." He looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded instead. "Fair enough." Thomas arrived at dawn the next morning, and the real work began. Elena watched in fascination as he and Rowan laid out the foundation lines using string and stakes, measuring and remeasuring until everything was square and level. Rowan's movements were careful, his bandaged hands clearly causing him pain, but he pushed through it with grim determination. "Mr. Hale," Thomas said after an hour, "you're going to hurt yourself worse if you keep gripping tools that hard. Let me handle the measuring. You can call out the numbers and supervise." "I can work." "Nobody said you couldn't, but working smart is different than working through pain that's going to set back your healing." Thomas's tone was respectful but firm. "I've seen men push too hard with injuries like yours. Hands are delicate. You damage them worse now, they might not come back right at all." Rowan's jaw tightened, but after a moment he stepped back. "Fine. You're right. I'll supervise." It was clearly killing him to admit it. Elena watched from where she was organizing the tool pile and felt a pang of sympathy. For a man who'd built his identity on physical capability, being forced to step back must have felt like another kind of burn. She brought them water mid-morning, along with biscuits she'd managed to make in a Dutch oven over the fire. They weren't great, too dense, slightly charred on the bottom, but Rowan ate his without complaint. "You'll get better at the cooking," he said. "Takes practice." "Is that your polite way of saying these are terrible?" "No, that's my polite way of saying they're edible but not good." He saw her expression and almost smiled. "Honesty, remember? You said you preferred it." "I did say that." She bit into her biscuit and grimaced. "You're right. These are terrible." Thomas laughed, a quiet sound like he wasn't used to doing it. "My wife's first biscuits were so hard we used them as doorstops. She laughed about it for years after. You'll figure it out, Miss Cross." "Elena, please, and I hope you're right." By mid-afternoon, they had the floor joists laid and secured. It was remarkable to watch the structure take shape, to see something solid emerging from careful planning and hard work. Elena found herself drawn to the process, asking questions about why they did things certain ways, learning the vocabulary of construction. "You're curious," Thomas observed during a water break. Most ladies wouldn't care about joist spacing and load bearing. Most ladies aren't trying to understand how to maintain a homestead, Elena replied. If I'm going to live here, I want to know how everything works. Rowan was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. She's like that, he said to Thomas. Wants to understand everything. Sounds like a good quality in a partner. Yeah. Rowan's voice was quiet. Yeah, it is, but... The work fell into a rhythm over the next 2 weeks. Thomas arrived each morning, and he and Rowan worked on the house frame while Elena handled everything else. Cooking, cleaning, managing supplies, tending the half-wild chickens, retrieving the milk cow from the neighbor and learning to milk it. She'd never milked a cow before, and the first few attempts were disasters. The cow kicked over the bucket. Elena got sprayed in the face. But eventually, through sheer stubborn persistence, she figured it out. Mrs. Carson rode out one afternoon to check on them, bringing vegetables from her garden and news from town. She found Elena up to her elbows in laundry, scrubbing clothes against a washboard set up by the creek. Good heavens, child, Mrs. Carson said, dismounting. You look like you've been dragged behind a horse. Elena looked down at herself, dress stained, hair escaping its pins, face probably streaked with dirt, and laughed. That's about how I feel. Is he treating you well, Rowan, I mean? He's not difficult? He's difficult, Elena admitted, but not cruel, not unkind, just stubborn and proud and convinced he has to do everything himself. That's Rowan Hale in 3 words. Mrs. Carson set her basket down and helped Elena wring out a shirt. His first wife used to complain about that constantly, said living with him was like pulling teeth. He told me she left. She did. Went back east, remarried within a year to some banker. Probably for the best. They were miserable together. Mrs. Carson glanced toward where Rowan and Thomas were working on the roof frame. But he took it hard. Thought it meant he was unfit for marriage, that there was something wrong with him. Closed himself off even more after that. Elena wrung out another garment. I'm not his first wife. No, you're not. You're tougher, I think, more practical. That might be what he needs. Or we'll drive each other crazy within a month. Mrs. Carson laughed. That's always a possibility, but I don't think so. I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks you're not watching, like he can't quite believe you're real. That made Elena pause. What do you mean? I mean he spent 3 years convincing himself he's not worth caring about, and then you showed up and didn't run away. That means something to a man like him, even if he doesn't have words for it. Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she just kept washing clothes. But Mrs. Carson's words stayed with her the rest of the day, circling in her mind like birds looking for a place to land. That night, after Thomas had gone home and dinner was done, Elena found Rowan sitting on the foundation of the new house, just staring out at the darkening land. Can I join you? She asked. He shifted slightly to make room. She sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. It's starting to look like something, she said, nodding at the frame rising around them. Yeah, Thomas is good, fast, precise. We'll have it enclosed before the weather turns, and then we can work on the interior over winter. If winter's mild, if it's not... He trailed off. We'll manage either way. He turned to look at her. You keep saying that. We'll manage, like it's certain. Isn't it? We've come this far. We've had good luck. Lumber arriving on time, Thomas being available, good weather. Luck runs out. So does bad luck, Elena countered. Your barn getting hit by lightning. That was incredibly bad luck. The odds of us having another disaster like that are low. You believe that? I believe we make our own odds by being prepared and working hard. And we're doing both. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mrs. Carson says you're tough. She came by today? Yeah, I saw her leaving. What else did she say? Elena hesitated, then decided on honesty. That your first wife complained about you being difficult. That you closed yourself off after she left. That you think there's something wrong with you. His jaw tightened. Sounds like Mrs. Carson talks too much. She cares about you. That's not a bad thing. She tell you anything else? That you look at me like you can't believe I'm real. Rowan stood abruptly, moving to the edge of the foundation. For a moment, Elena thought he'd walk away, but he just stood there, his back to her. I don't know how to do this, he said finally, his voice low. Be someone's partner. Let someone in. I'm afraid I'll mess it up. That you'll wake up one day and realize you made a mistake staying here. Elena stood and moved to stand beside him. I'm afraid of the same thing. That I'll do something wrong, say the wrong thing, and you'll realize you don't actually want me here. He looked at her, surprise flickering across his scarred face. You think that? Every day. I look at you working, building, doing things you've done your whole life, and I think about how little I actually bring to this. How I'm just the money, that once the house is built and the initial investment is done, you won't need me anymore. That's not... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Elena, the money helps. It does. But that's not why I'm letting you stay. Then why? He looked away, out at the darkening land. Because when you're here, this place feels less empty. Because you ask questions about load-bearing joists and milk cows like the answers matter. Because you burned those biscuits and laughed about it instead of getting upset. He paused. Because I work harder when you're watching. Want to do better. Be better. Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Rowan, I'm not good with words, can't make pretty speeches, but I want you to know, this partnership, it matters to me. You matter. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't even particularly eloquent. But it was real, and it was honest, and it was more than Elena had expected from this guarded, wounded man. You matter to me too, she said quietly. They stood there in the gathering dark, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. The frame of the house rose around them like the skeleton of something waiting to be born. And for the first time since arriving in Texas, Elena felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd found what she'd been looking for. A place to belong. A person to belong with. The work continued to be hard. Elena's hands developed calluses, and Rowan's burns slowly healed into permanent scars. Thomas worked steadily, teaching them both as he went. The house took shape. Walls rising, roof going on, windows and doors fitted into place. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid and well built, and every nail driven felt like a promise kept. They didn't talk much about feelings after that night. Neither of them was built for constant emotional discussion. But small things changed. Rowan started helping with dinner preparation, his healing hands relearning old skills. Elena found herself sitting closer to him by the fire. Their conversations grew longer, ranging from practical matters to stories about their pasts, to comfortable silences that didn't need filling. The house was nearly finished when everything fell apart. Elena was in town when it happened. She'd ridden in alone to pick up the glass panes for the windows. They'd finally arrived after a 2-week delay, and to settle some accounts at the general store. Rowan had wanted to come with her, but Thomas needed help with the roof shingles, and they were racing against weather reports of rain coming in from the west. I can manage, she told him. It's just glass and paperwork. He'd looked uncertain, but nodded. Be careful with those panes. They break easier than you'd think. I know how to handle glass, Rowan. I know you do. Just be careful. She'd smiled at his concern. This man who was slowly learning to care out loud instead of keeping everything locked behind silence. The ride to town had been pleasant, the air cooling as autumn properly settled in. The house was so close to finished now, just the windows, some interior work, and it would be livable. They'd been sleeping in the lean-tos for nearly 2 months, and Elena was ready for walls and a roof and a door that closed. Mr. Gaines had the glass ready, packed carefully in straw. He helped her load it onto the small wagon she'd borrowed from the Carsons. That's the last of what you ordered, he said, checking his ledger. Brings your total to... He paused, running his finger down the page. Quite a bit, actually. You've spent considerably this fall. I'm aware. Can I settle the account today? All of it? His eyebrows rose. Miss Cross, that's nearly $300. I can extend credit if... No credit necessary. Elena opened her reticule and began counting out bills. She was aware of a few other customers in the store going quiet, watching. Money like this didn't change hands often in Harlo's past. Gaines accepted the payment, his expression carefully neutral, but she could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. $300, paid in cash, without hesitation. On top of what she'd already spent on lumber and tools and supplies. That was more than most families in this town saw in 2 years. She was tucking her receipt away when she heard the voice behind her. Well now, Looks like Rowan Hale married himself a rich woman. Elena turned to find a man she didn't recognize, middle-aged, weathered face, clothes that suggested a working ranch hand. He wasn't being hostile exactly, just observational, but there was something in his tone that made her spine stiffen. Mrs. Carson, she corrected, though they hadn't actually married yet. It was simpler than explaining their arrangement. Right, my apologies, ma'am. He tipped his hat. Just surprised is all. Rowan always seemed like he'd rather eat dirt than take help from anyone. Must be quite something, having a wife who can bankroll rebuilding an entire homestead. We're partners, Elena said evenly. We both contribute what we can. Sure. Partners. The man smiled, not unkindly, but there was something knowing in it. Still, must be nice for him. Going from nothing to having everything paid for. Elena wanted to argue, to explain that it wasn't like that, but she was aware of the audience now. Other customers pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. This story would be all over town by sunset. The rich woman from St. Louis, who'd bought herself a burned-out homestead and a desperate man to go with it. She gathered her things with as much dignity as she could manage and left without another word. The ride back was longer than the ride in, or maybe it just felt that way with the man's words circling in her head like vultures. She'd known there would be talk. A woman arriving alone to marry a stranger, staying after finding his place destroyed, funding the entire rebuild. Of course people would talk. But hearing it said out loud, hearing the assumption that Rowan was just living off her money, made her angry in a way she hadn't expected. Because it wasn't true. He worked harder than anyone she'd ever known, pushing himself past exhaustion every single day. His hands had healed enough to work now, though they still pained him, and he never complained, just kept going. He taught her everything about the homestead, included her in every decision, treated her like an equal even when his pride clearly struggled with the arrangement. But people on the outside didn't see that. They just saw money changing hands and made their assumptions. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the turn onto their property. The wagon jolted over a rut, and the glass panes clinked ominously in their straw packing. She slowed, more careful now, focusing on the road. The house came into view, and despite her troubled thoughts, she felt a surge of satisfaction. It was beautiful, simple and practical, but solid and well built. The roof was finished, all the shingles in place. The walls were painted white, bright against the darkening sky. It looked like a home. Rowan and Thomas were standing by the woodpile, examining something. As she drove up, Rowan turned and she saw the smile that had been coming more easily to his face these days. "You're back. Any trouble with the glass?" "No trouble. It's all here, intact." She climbed down from the wagon, and he came over to help unload. "Thomas is finishing up for the day," Rowan said. "Tomorrow we can install the windows, and then we're basically done with the exterior." "That's wonderful." He looked at her more closely. "Something wrong? You seem off." "Just tired from the ride. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing, and they both knew it. Thomas said his goodbyes and headed home, and Elena started preparing dinner while Rowan carefully unloaded the glass panes and stored them in the nearly finished house. They ate in near silence, the comfortable companionship from recent weeks strained by whatever Elena was holding back. Finally, Rowan set down his plate. "All right. What happened in town?" "Nothing happened." "Elena," she sighed, "someone made a comment about you, about us. It was nothing." "What kind of comment? Does it matter?" "It does if it upset you enough that you've barely said 3 words since you got back." His voice was patient but firm. "What did they say?" Elena stared at the fire, debating whether to tell him. But they'd promised each other honesty, hadn't they? Just that it must be nice for you, having a wife who can bankroll everything. That you went from nothing to having it all paid for. The silence that followed was different from their usual silences. This one was heavy, dangerous. "I see," Rowan said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "It doesn't matter what some ranch hand thinks. He doesn't know anything about us or how we... How much did you spend today?" "What?" "At the store. How much did you spend?" Elena hesitated. $300 to settle the remaining account. 300. He said it like he was tasting something bitter. On top of the 400 for lumber, and the 150 for tools, and everything else. "We agreed. I know what we agreed." He stood abruptly. pacing, partnership, equal contribution. Except it's not equal, is it? I've been lying to myself, thinking I'm building this alongside you, but the truth is you're paying for everything, and I'm just, what, providing the labor? You're providing knowledge and expertise, and those don't cost money, Elena. They're not the same thing. He turned to face her, and she could see the old walls going back up behind his eyes. Do you know what I've contributed financially to this rebuild? $43. That's it. $43 from odd jobs and what little I had saved. You've spent, what, 800 more? The specific amount doesn't... It does matter. His voice rose, frustration breaking through. Don't you see? Everyone in town is going to think exactly what that ranch hand said, that I'm living off you, that I married some rich woman so I wouldn't have to do the hard work of rebuilding myself. Anyone who thinks that is an idiot. They can see how hard you work. Can they? Or do they just see a new house going up impossibly fast because someone else is footing the bill? He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture agitated. I thought I could handle this. Thought I could swallow my pride and accept help because it was practical, because we were partners. But I can't. I hate it. I hate taking your money. I hate feeling like I'm not pulling my weight. I hate that people are probably calling me a kept man behind my back. Elena felt her own anger rising. So what are you saying? That we should have stayed in those damn lean-tos all winter? Let the house sit half-built because you're too proud to use available resources? I'm saying I should have rebuilt slower. Done it myself. Earned every board and every nail through my own work. That would have taken years. So what? At least it would have been mine. He was shouting now, and so was she, both of them on their feet, the fire burning between them like the physical manifestation of their argument. It is yours. It's ours. We built this together. You paid for it. There's a difference. Only in your stubborn, prideful head. They stared at each other across the fire, both breathing hard. Elena could see the war happening behind Rowan's eyes, the part of him that knew she was right fighting against the part that felt diminished by accepting help. And she understood it. She did. But understanding didn't make it hurt less that he was pushing her away. How much do you have? He asked quietly. Really, how much money did you come here with? Elena's jaw tightened. I'm not telling you that. Why not? If we're partners, if this is all equal, why won't you tell me? Because it'll make this worse. Because you'll do exactly what you're doing now, reduce everything to numbers and dollars, and feel inadequate instead of seeing what we've actually built. Just tell me, please. She could have refused, should have, probably, but she was tired of dancing around it, tired of trying to protect his feelings when he seemed determined to tear apart everything they'd created. $12,000, she said. Give or take. The number hung in the air between them like smoke from the fire. Rowan's face went pale, then red, then pale again. 12,000, he repeated, his voice hollow. It was an inheritance. My mother worked herself to death in that laundry, but she'd been saving for years, every penny she could spare. And then I worked as a governess for 10 years, living in other people's homes, spending almost nothing. It accumulated. $12,000. He said it again, like he couldn't quite process it. Jesus Christ, Elena. That's more than this whole property is worth, more than most people see in a lifetime. It's just money. Just money. Just... He laughed, that harsh, bitter sound she hadn't heard since the first day. You could have gone anywhere, done anything, bought yourself a mansion in some city, and instead you came here to a burned-out homestead in the middle of nowhere and attached yourself to a man with nothing. I attached myself to a man I thought I could build something with. Was I wrong? I don't know. His voice cracked slightly. Maybe. Maybe you should have picked someone who could actually be your equal instead of your charity project. Don't do that. Don't reduce this to what it is. I'm a failure, Elena. My first marriage failed. My homestead burned down. I can't even rebuild my own damn house without a woman's money. What exactly am I bringing to this partnership besides some farming knowledge and a piece of land that isn't worth a tenth of what you have? Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're bringing yourself. That's supposed to be enough. Well, it's not. Not for me. He turned away, staring out at the dark land. I need to do this right. Need to prove to myself, to everyone, that I can stand on my own 2 feet. And how exactly do you plan to do that? I don't know yet. But I can't stay here, living in a house you paid for, eating food bought with your money, pretending I'm an equal partner when we both know I'm not. The words hit her like a physical blow. You're leaving. I need to earn enough to pay you back. Every cent you've spent on this place, I'm going to pay you back. I don't want your money. Too bad, because I can't live with myself otherwise. He finally turned to face her, and his expression was set in stone. There's work up north, cattle drives, and ranch work. Hard work, but it pays decent. I can make $50, maybe $60 a month if I work straight through. In a year and a half, I could pay back most of what you've spent. And what am I supposed to do while you're off trying to satisfy your wounded pride? Sit here alone in this house we built together? Wait for you to decide you're man enough to come back? You could leave. Go back to St. Louis. Find someone worth your time and money. Or you could stay, and we could finish what we started. I can't. His voice was quiet now, defeated. Elena, I just can't. Every time I look at this house, I see your money, not our work. Every time someone in town congratulates me on the rebuild, I feel like a fraud. I can't live like that. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire. When would you leave? Soon. Few days, maybe. I need to finish the windows first, make sure everything's secure before the weather turns. Then I'll head north. And us? What happens to us? He looked at her, and for a moment she saw past the pride and the anger to the man underneath, lost and hurt and convinced he wasn't enough. I don't know. I guess that depends on whether you're still here when I get back. If you get back. I'll be back. This is my land, my home. I'll come back. Will you? Elena's voice was sharp now, anger replacing hurt. Or will you find another reason to run? Another excuse for why you're not good enough, why partnership means weakness. You say your first wife complained that living with you was like living with a stone wall, but maybe she was right. Maybe you are too closed off, too proud, too damn stubborn to let anyone actually get close to you. The words hit their mark. She saw him flinch, saw the pain flash across his face before he locked it down behind that expressionless mask he wore so well. Maybe she was right, he said quietly. Maybe I am unfit for partnership or marriage or whatever the hell this is, but at least I'll know I paid my own way. He walked away then, toward the creek, leaving Elena standing by the fire alone. She stared after him, torn between chasing him down and letting him go. Part of her wanted to scream at him, shake him, make him see how stupid and self-destructive he was being. Part of her wanted to cry, to mourn the partnership she'd thought they were building. And part of her, the part she didn't want to acknowledge, wondered if he was right. If she had been trying to buy herself a place to belong, using money to speed past the hard work of actually building something real. She sat back down by the fire and let the tears come finally, quiet and bitter. The house stood behind her, nearly finished, beautiful and solid and empty of everything except the echo of two people who couldn't figure out how to meet in the middle. The next 3 days were awful. They worked together on the windows because it required two people, but they barely spoke beyond what was necessary. Pass me the putty. Hold this steady. That's good. I've got it. The silence between them wasn't comfortable anymore. It was jagged, full of all the things they weren't saying. Thomas noticed immediately when he came by to help with the final touches. Everything all right? He asked Elena quietly, while Rowan was inside measuring for something. No, Elena said honestly. It's not. Figured. You two are moving around each other like wounded animals. He hammered in a nail, thoughtful. Can I offer some advice? Please. My wife and I, we've been married 22 years, and I've learned that sometimes you have to let people work through their own foolishness in their own time. Doesn't mean you give up on them, just means you don't beat your head against their stubbornness until you're both bloody. So I should let him leave. I'm saying you can't stop him if he's determined, but you can decide what you'll be when he comes back. If he comes back. He says he will. Thomas smiled slightly. Rowan hails many things, but he's not a liar. If he says he'll be back, he will be. Question is whether you'll still want him after he's done being an idiot. Elena didn't have an answer for that. On the 4th day, Rowan announced he was leaving in the morning. Elena was washing vegetables from Mrs. Carson's latest delivery, and she didn't look up. I heard you. I talked to the Carsons. Jimmy will come by twice a week to check on things. Help with anything heavy you need done, Mrs. Carson said you're welcome to stay with them if you get lonely. I won't get lonely. Elena, what? She finally looked up, meeting his eyes. What else is there to say? You've made your decision. You're choosing your pride over everything we built. There's nothing left to discuss. It's not about pride. It's entirely about pride. You'd rather work yourself to death trying to earn money you don't owe me than stay here and build a life together. If that's not pride, I don't know what is. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is pride. But it's who I am, Elena. I can't just turn it off because it's inconvenient. I'm not asking you to turn it off. I'm asking you to see past it long enough to recognize what we have here. And what do we have? Really? His voice was tired, worn down. A business arrangement? A partnership that's 90% your money and 10% my labor? That's not what I want. It's not enough. Then what do you want? To feel like an equal. To contribute something that matters. To not wake up every morning knowing I'm living in a house I didn't earn. He rubbed his face, exhausted. I can't explain it better than that. Elena set down the vegetables and dried her hands slowly. My mother used to tell me that pride was the devil's favorite tool, that it convinced good people to do stupid things, to throw away chances at happiness because they were too busy protecting their precious egos. She looked at him steadily. I think she was right. Maybe she was, but it's my stupid thing to do. Yes, it is. She turned back to the vegetables. There's bread and cheese for your trip. I packed it already. It's in the house. I assume you'll want to leave at first light. Elena, I have work to do, and apparently, so do you. He stood there for a long moment, and she could feel him wanting to say something, searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, he just left, walking toward the house they'd built together and would now live in separately. That night, Elena lay in her lean-to and stared at the canvas above her head. The house was finished enough to move into, had been for days, but neither of them had suggested it. Maybe they'd both known, on some level, that they wouldn't be moving in together. She thought about packing, about leaving before he did and saving herself the pain of watching him go. But that felt too much like running away, and Elena had never been a runner. If this partnership was ending, she'd face it head on, not slink away in the dark. Morning came gray and cold, the first real bite of winter in the air. Elena built up the fire and made coffee, her movements automatic. Rowan emerged from his shelter with a pack on his back and a bedroll tied to it. He'd saddled the horse, his horse now, bought with money he'd earned from odd jobs, one of the few things that was purely his. He accepted the coffee she handed him and the packet of food. They stood on opposite sides of the fire, the flames between them like everything else. I'll send money when I can, he said. Whatever I earn, I'll send it back. Keep it. Buy yourself decent food, a warm coat. I don't need your money. Elena, I mean it. I don't want you half-starving yourself on some cattle drive to pay back a debt I never asked for and don't want. His jaw tightened. Fine. But I'm still paying you back eventually. Do what you want. You will, anyway. They stood in silence, and Elena wondered if this was it. If this was how it ended, two people standing on opposite sides of a fire, unable to reach across the distance they'd created. Take care of yourself, Rowan said finally. You too. He mounted the horse, settling into the saddle. For a moment, she thought he might say something else, might change his mind, might realize what he was throwing away. But he just tipped his hat to her and turned the horse north. Elena watched him ride away, his figure getting smaller against the gray sky. She watched until he disappeared over the rise, until there was nothing left but empty land and the wind picking up. Then she turned to look at the house, their house, beautiful and finished and hollow. She'd come to Texas looking for a place to belong, and she'd found it. But she'd also found a partner who couldn't see past his own pride long enough to recognize what they'd built together. The question now was what she'd do about it. Elena walked into the house for the first time alone. It smelled of fresh wood and paint, of possibility and potential. The windows let in gray morning light. The floors were solid under her feet. The kitchen had a proper stove. The bedroom had space for a real bed. It was everything they'd planned, everything they'd worked for. And it was empty. She stood in the middle of the main room and felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. She could leave, take her remaining money, go back to St. Louis or somewhere new, start over again. She'd done it before, she could do it again. Or she could stay, make this house a home, prove to Rowan and maybe to herself that what they'd built mattered, that it was worth fighting for even when he was too stubborn to see it. Elena thought about Thomas's words, "You can decide what you'll be when he comes back." She looked around the empty house one more time, then rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The first week alone was the hardest. Elena moved into the house properly, setting up furniture she'd ordered from town, a bed frame, a table, chairs, simple things that turned empty rooms into something livable. She kept herself busy from dawn to dusk, refusing to let her mind wander to where Rowan might be or what he might be doing. The work was good for that, physical labor that left her too exhausted to think much by the time darkness fell. Jimmy came by as promised, checking on things, helping her move the heavier furniture. He was a good kid, 17 now, and growing into the kind of man who'd be useful on any homestead. He didn't ask about Rowan, which Elena appreciated. The whole town probably knew by now that the arrangement had fallen apart, but at least people had the decency not to gossip to her face. Mrs. Carson was less tactful. She showed up on the 8th day with a basket of preserves and a determined expression. "All right," she said, setting the basket on Elena's new kitchen table. "Tell me what happened." "Nothing happened. Rowan went north to find work. I stayed here." "Elena." Mrs. Carson pulled out a chair and sat down uninvited. "I've known that man for 5 years, watched him rebuild after his first wife left, watched him lose everything in the fire, watched him meet you and start to come back to life. And now he's gone and you're here looking like someone died. So I'm asking again, what happened?" Elena sank into the opposite chair, suddenly too tired to maintain the pretense that everything was fine. "He couldn't live with taking my money, couldn't stand feeling like he wasn't contributing equally, so he left to earn enough to pay me back, even though I never asked him to and don't want him to." "Men and their pride," Mrs. Carson said, shaking her head. "It'll be the death of all of us. I told him he was being stupid, told him everything we'd built together mattered more than who paid for what. He wouldn't listen." "Of course he wouldn't. That would require him to admit he might be wrong about something." Mrs. Carson reached across the table and squeezed Elena's hand. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" "I can't force him to come back. Can't make him see sense if he's determined not to." "No, but you can decide what happens when he does come back. Because he will, you know. Rowan's too stubborn to quit on something he's started." Elena pulled her hand away, standing to pace. "Maybe I don't want him to come back. Maybe I'm tired of fighting against his pride, tired of being made to feel like my money is some kind of curse instead of a resource we could use together." "Are you? Tired of him, I mean?" Elena stopped pacing, staring out the window at the land she'd helped rebuild. "No," she admitted quietly. "I'm angry at him, frustrated, but not tired of him. Is that foolish? Probably, but love usually is. I don't—" Elena stopped herself. Did she love him? She hadn't let herself think about it in those terms. They'd been partners, collaborators, two broken people trying to build something functional from damaged pieces. When had it become something more than that? But she knew the answer. It had been that night on the foundation, when he'd told her she mattered. When he'd admitted he worked harder because she was watching, wanted to be better because she was there. That's when partnership had started turning into something deeper, something neither of them had words for or knew how to handle. "He matters to me," Elena said finally. "More than I expected, more than is probably smart." "Then you need to figure out what you want to do with that. Because sitting here waiting for him to work through his issues isn't going to solve anything." "What else can I do?" Mrs. Carson smiled. "You're a smart woman, Elena. You'll think of something." After she left, Elena sat at her table and thought. Mrs. Carson was right. Waiting wasn't solving anything. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized the problem wasn't just Rowan's pride. It was what that pride was built on. The belief that his worth was measured in dollars earned, in being able to provide financially, in traditional masculine contributions to a household. But what if there was a way to use her resources that went beyond just rebuilding their homestead? What if there was something bigger they could build together? Something that would give Rowan purpose beyond just proving himself? The idea started small, just a seed of possibility. But the more Elena thought about it, the more it grew. She rode into town the next day and asked to speak with Dr. Patterson. He was the only doctor serving Harlo's Pass and 3 other small communities within a 20-mile radius, and he looked perpetually exhausted. His office was cramped, poorly lit, and filled with outdated equipment. "Miss Cross," he said, gesturing her into his cluttered examination room. "What can I do for you? You're not ill, I hope?" "No, I'm fine. I wanted to ask you about the medical situation in Harlo's Pass." He raised an eyebrow. "The medical situation? How many people are you serving? What are the biggest needs? What keeps you from providing better care?" Patterson leaned back against his desk, studying her. "That's an odd set of questions. May I ask why you're interested?" "Just exploring possibilities. Please, I'd appreciate your honest assessment." He sighed, running a hand through graying hair. "All right. I'm the only doctor for 4 communities, roughly 800 people spread across a huge area. I'm in my 60s and I'm tired. I can handle minor injuries and common illnesses, but anything serious requires a 2-day trip to Austin, and most people can't afford that. I lost a child last year to appendicitis because by the time the family brought her to me, it was too late. Lost a man to blood poisoning from a farm accident because I don't have the facilities or equipment for proper surgery." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "What would you need to provide better care?" "A proper clinic, for starters. A building with multiple examination rooms, a surgery, storage for supplies and medicine. Better equipment. I'm working with tools older than my practice. And honestly, another doctor, or at least a trained nurse. I can't be in 4 places at once." He looked at her curiously. "Why are you asking these questions, Miss Cross?" "Because I'm wondering what it would take to build a clinic here. A real one, properly equipped and staffed." Patterson's eyes widened. "That would cost—" "I know what it would cost, roughly, and I think it's possible." Elena met his gaze steadily. "If I were to fund such a project, would you be willing to stay on? Help establish it? Train any additional staff we could bring in?" "Are you serious?" "Completely." He stared at her for a long moment, then slowly smiled. "Miss Cross, if you're serious about this, then yes. Absolutely yes. It would be the capstone of my career, and it would save lives. Literally save lives." "Then let's start planning." They spent 2 hours going over details. Patterson sketched out what a proper clinic would look like, what equipment would be essential versus ideal, what kind of staff they'd need. The costs were significant, $3,000, maybe 4, depending on how elaborate they went and whether they could find a doctor willing to relocate to a small Texas town. Elena rode home with her mind racing. $4,000 was a lot, but she had it. The question was whether this was the right use of it, and more importantly, whether Rowan would see it the way she did. Not as charity, but as investment in something that mattered. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena threw herself into research and planning. She corresponded with medical supply companies, got estimates from builders, reached out to a nursing school in San Antonio about potential graduates looking for positions. She visited other nearby communities, talking to town leaders about the need for better medical care and whether they'd support a regional clinic. The responses were overwhelmingly positive. Everyone saw the need. Everyone had stories of people who died or suffered because proper medical care was too far away or too expensive. A centrally located clinic in Harlo's Pass could serve thousands of people. Elena drew up plans, revised them, drew them up again. She consulted with Patterson, with Mrs. Carson, with Thomas, who had construction experience. She began to see not just a building, but a future. Something that would outlast her and Rowan, something that would matter long after they were gone. And maybe, just maybe, something that would show Rowan that money wasn't the enemy, that resources could be used to build things that mattered, that made a real difference in people's lives. That contribution didn't have to be measured in personal sacrifice and sweat equity alone. A month after Rowan left, Elena received her first letter from him. It was brief, written on cheap paper in his careful handwriting. "Elena, I found work on a ranch near Amarillo. The pay is decent and the work is hard. I'm doing fine. I hope you're well and that the house is treating you right. I think about what we built often. I hope you don't regret staying. Rowan." She read it 3 times, looking for something between the lines, some hint that he missed her or regretted leaving. But it was just facts, just information. No emotion, no vulnerability. Classic Rowan, locked behind his walls again. She wrote back, equally brief. "Rowan, I'm glad you found work. The house is fine. I've been keeping busy with a project of my own. The homestead is in good shape. Jimmy helps when needed. Take care of yourself. Elena. She didn't mention the clinic, not yet. The conversation needed to happen face to face. Winter settled in properly in December. Elena had the house weatherproofed and warm, with a good supply of firewood and provisions. She spent her days working on clinic plans and her evenings reading by lamplight, the silence of the house both peaceful and lonely. Mrs. Carson invited her for Christmas dinner, and Elena accepted, grateful for the company. The Carson house was full of noise and warmth, 3 generations gathered around a table that groaned with food. Elena found herself relaxing, laughing at Jimmy's stories, enjoying the simple pleasure of being part of a family celebration, even if it wasn't her own family. "Any word from Rowan?" Mr. Carson asked during dessert. "A letter last month. He's working a ranch near Amarillo." "That's hard country in winter. Hard work, too." "He's used to hard work." Mr. Carson nodded, not pushing further. But later, when Elena was helping Mrs. Carson with dishes, the older woman said quietly, "You miss him." It wasn't a question. Elena didn't bother denying it. "Yes." "Have you told him about your clinic idea?" "Not yet. I want to have everything planned out first. Want to show him it's not just some whim, but something real and important." "And you think that'll change his mind? Make him see your money differently?" "I don't know, but I have to try." Elena set down a dried plate. "I can't just sit around waiting for him to decide he's earned enough or proven enough or whatever metric he's using to measure his worth. I need to show him there's another way to think about all this." "What if he still doesn't come around? What if his pride is too entrenched?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "Then at least I'll have built something that matters. The clinic will save lives whether Rowan appreciates it or not. And if he can't see past his own issues to be part of something bigger," she trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. "Then you'll have to decide if you can live with that," Mrs. Carson finished gently. "Yes, I suppose I will." January brought bitter cold and 2 more letters from Rowan. Both were brief, factual updates about work and weather and not much else. Elena responded in kind, sharing news about the homestead and the town, but still not mentioning the clinic. She was waiting for the right moment, though she wasn't sure when that would be. In February, everything accelerated. Elena finalized the clinic plans and purchased the land, a lot near the center of town, visible and accessible. She hired builders and ordered supplies. Word spread quickly, and suddenly the whole town was involved. Men volunteered labor. Women organized fundraising dinners. Everyone wanted to be part of building something that would serve the entire community. Dr. Patterson was beside himself with excitement. "I never thought I'd see this," he told Elena as they watched the foundation being laid. "A proper clinic, real equipment, maybe even another doctor eventually. You're changing lives here, Miss Cross." "We're changing lives," Elena corrected. "This is a community project. Started with your vision and funded with your money. Don't diminish your role in this." But Elena wasn't interested in credit. She was interested in building something that lasted, something that proved resources could be used for more than just personal comfort or rebuilding what fire had destroyed. Something bigger than pride or partnership or any of the things she and Rowan had fought about. The clinic took shape quickly. Unlike the slow, careful building of the homestead, this was a community effort with multiple crews working simultaneously. By March, the structure was up. By April, they were working on the interior. The medical supply companies began delivering equipment, examination tables, surgical instruments, proper lighting, storage cabinets, everything Patterson had dreamed of. Elena threw herself into every detail, working alongside the builders, organizing supplies, coordinating volunteers. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and it filled the empty spaces that Rowan's absence had left behind. Not completely, nothing could do that, but enough that she could function, could see purpose beyond just waiting for him to come home. If he came home. She tried not to think about that possibility. Tried not to imagine him deciding the North was where he belonged, that the life he'd found on someone else's ranch was better than trying to rebuild a partnership that had shattered so completely. But late at night, alone in the house they'd built together, the fears crept in. What if he never came back? What if all of this, the clinic, the plans, the hope that they could find their way back to each other, was for nothing? In May, Nearly 7 months after Rowan had left, Elena received a different kind of letter. The handwriting was still his, but the tone was changed. Elena, I'm coming home. I've saved enough to feel like I've earned my keep, and the work here is drying up for the season anyway. I'll be there in 2 weeks. I hope that's all right. I hope you're still there. I wouldn't blame you if you weren't, but I'm hoping anyway. Rowan. Elena read the letter 3 times, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. He was coming back. After 7 months of silence punctuated by brief, emotionless updates, he was coming home. But what kind of homecoming would it be? Would he see what she'd built and understand? Or would he just see more proof that she'd spent money while he'd been gone? More evidence that he couldn't match her contributions? She carried the letter to the clinic site, where the finishing touches were being applied. Patterson was there, supervising the installation of cabinets in what would be the supply room. He's coming back, Elena said without preamble. Patterson looked up. Rowan? 2 weeks. Well, Patterson set down the clipboard he'd been holding. That's good timing. We should be finished by then. You can show him what you've built. What we've built, Elena corrected automatically. And I don't know if he'll see it the way I do. He left because he couldn't handle my money. What's he going to think when he finds out I spent thousands more while he was gone? Maybe he'll surprise you. Or maybe this will just prove he was right to leave. Patterson crossed the room and put a hand on her shoulder. Elena, I've been a doctor for 40 years. I've seen all kinds of people face all kinds of challenges. And one thing I've learned is that you can't control how others react to what you do. You can only control what you choose to do and why. You built this clinic because it needed building, because lives would be saved. That's good work, regardless of how one stubborn man feels about it. Elena nodded, trying to absorb his words. You're right. I know you're right. But you love him anyway, so his opinion matters. I never said I loved him. Patterson smiled gently. You didn't have to. The next 2 weeks crawled by. Elena finished the last details on the clinic, hanging curtains, stocking supplies, setting up the small office space. She cleaned the Homestead house from top to bottom, prepared the guest room in case Rowan wanted his own space, tried to anticipate every possible scenario for their reunion. Mrs. Carson found her scrubbing the kitchen floor for the 3rd time and physically dragged her away from the house. Enough, she said firmly. You're making yourself crazy. He'll be here when he's here, and no amount of cleaning is going to change how that conversation goes. I just want everything to be right. Everything is right. You've built something incredible. The clinic is going to change this whole region. That's what matters, not whether your floors are spotless. But what if he, What if he what? Doesn't appreciate it? Gets angry? Leaves again? Mrs. Carson's voice softened. Then you deal with that when it happens. But driving yourself mad with worry beforehand doesn't help anything. Elena knew she was right, but knowing and feeling were different things. She forced herself to slow down, to spend the last few days before Rowan's arrival doing normal things, tending the garden she'd planted, visiting with neighbors, reading in the evenings. But her mind was always half elsewhere, counting down the hours. On the 14th day, she saw a rider approaching from the north. Her heart stuttered, then began racing. She was in the garden, dirt on her hands and her hair escaping its pins, and she almost ran inside to make herself presentable. But she stopped herself. If Rowan was coming home, he could see her as she actually was. Not some cleaned-up version, but the real Elena, dirt and all. She stood and wiped her hands on her apron, watching him ride closer. He looked thinner than she remembered, harder somehow, like 7 months of ranch work had worn away everything soft. His face was more tanned, his hair longer. But it was still Rowan, still the man she'd built a house with and fought with, and missed more than she'd wanted to admit. He reined in the horse at the edge of the property and just sat there for a moment, taking it all in. The house looked good. She'd kept it maintained, painted the trim, planted flowers around the foundation. The barn was finished now too, something she'd worked on with Jimmy's help over the winter. The fields were planted, green shoots promising a good harvest. Finally, he dismounted and walked toward her. She stayed where she was, letting him come to her, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Hello, Elena," he said when he was close enough. "Hello, Rowan." They stood there 3 feet apart, and the silence stretched between them. There was so much to say and no idea where to start. "The place looks good," he finally said. You've been taking care of it. That was the plan. The barn's finished. When did that happen? January. Jimmy helped. He nodded slowly, his eyes roaming over the property. You did all this yourself? With help. Thomas came by sometimes. The Carsons, other neighbors. People were kind. And you stayed. All this time you stayed. Where else would I go? This is my home. Something flickered across his face at that. Pain or regret or maybe hope. I wasn't sure you'd still be here. I almost wasn't, Elena admitted. I thought about leaving, going back to St. Louis or somewhere new, but I decided I wasn't going to let your pride drive me away from something I'd helped build. He flinched at that. Fair enough. I deserve that. You deserve a lot more than that, but I'm trying to be civil. Elena. He took a step closer. I'm sorry. I was wrong to leave. Wrong to let my pride matter more than what we were building together. I've spent 7 months thinking about it, and I was wrong. You're right. You were wrong. Her voice was sharper than she intended, months of hurt and anger bleeding through. You threw away our partnership because you couldn't handle feeling like you weren't the primary provider. You reduced everything we built together to a dollar amount and decided you didn't measure up. That was wrong and hurtful and incredibly stupid. I know. Do you? Because I need you to really understand what you did. You didn't just leave me here alone. You told me that my money, something I'd worked for, saved for, inherited from my mother who killed herself working, was somehow shameful. That using it to build something together made you less of a man. Rowan's face was pale. I didn't mean, yes, you did. Maybe you didn't say it exactly like that, but that's what you meant. And it hurt, Rowan. It really hurt. He stood there, and she watched him struggle with words, with emotion, with all the things he'd always found so difficult to express. Finally, he just said, I'm sorry. I don't know how else to say it. I was wrong, and I hurt you, and I'm sorry. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Why did you come back? Because this is where I belong. Because I've been miserable every single day I was gone. Because working from dawn to dusk on someone else's ranch made me realize that building something of your own, with someone who matters, is worth more than any amount of pride or independence. He took another step closer. Because I missed you. Every day I missed you. The words broke something open in her chest. I missed you too. Even when I was angry at you, even when I wanted to never see you again, I still missed you. Elena, I brought money. Not enough to pay you back for everything, but a start. Nearly $600. It's yours to put toward what you've spent to... I don't want it. But, Rowan, listen to me. Elena wiped her hands on her apron again, a nervous gesture. I need to show you something, and then we need to have a real conversation about all of this. About money and partnership and what we're actually building here. He looked confused, but nodded. All right. What do you need to show me? Come on. She led him to the wagon, and they rode into town in silence. Rowan kept glancing at her, clearly wanting to ask questions, but respecting her request to wait. When they got to Harlo's Pass and she directed him toward the clinic site, his confusion deepened. What is this? He asked as they pulled up in front of the completed building. This is the Harlo's Pass Medical Clinic. It opened last week. Elena climbed down from the wagon. Come inside. She led him through the front door into the waiting room, clean and bright, with chairs for patients and a desk for a receptionist. Then into the examination rooms, each equipped with proper tables and equipment. The surgical room with its specialized tools and excellent lighting. The supply room stocked with medicine and bandages and everything a doctor might need. Patterson's office, and beyond it, living quarters for when he needed to stay overnight for emergencies. Rowan walked through it all in silence, his face unreadable. When they'd seen everything, they ended up back in the waiting room. He stood in the middle of the space, just looking around. You built this, he said finally. While I was gone, you built an entire medical clinic. Yes. How much did it cost? About $4,000, all told, plus donated labor from the community. He turned to look at her, and she couldn't read his expression. $4,000. It's going to save lives, Rowan. Already has. Patterson performed an emergency surgery last week on a man who would have died on the trip to Austin. Children are getting vaccinations they couldn't afford before. Pregnant women have proper prenatal care. Elena moved to stand in front of him. This is what money can do when it's used for something bigger than just rebuilding one homestead or protecting one man's pride. You're saying I was wrong about all of it. I'm saying you were looking at it wrong. Money isn't good or bad. It's just a tool. What matters is what we build with it and why. Rowan sank into one of the waiting room chairs, and she saw how tired he was, bone-deep exhaustion that went beyond physical labor. I don't know what to say. You could start by telling me if you understand what I'm trying to show you. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I spent 7 months breaking my back on someone else's land, trying to earn enough money to feel like I was worth something, trying to prove I could contribute. And in that same time, you built something that's going to matter for decades. That's going to help hundreds, maybe thousands of people. He looked up at her. I was an idiot. Yes, you were. I reduced everything to pride and ego and my own wounded sense of worth, and I missed the bigger picture completely. Yes, you did. Is there any chance you can forgive me? Elena looked at this man, scarred and tired, and finally seen past his own walls. I don't know, she said honestly. You really hurt me, Rowan, and I need to know it won't happen again. That the next time things get hard or complicated or you feel like you're not measuring up, you won't just run away. I won't. I swear, I won't. How can I trust that? He stood, moving to face her. Because I've learned something these past 7 months. Being alone, working myself to exhaustion, earning money, none of it made me feel worth a damn. But being here with you, building something together, that made me feel like I mattered. And I'm not stupid enough to throw that away twice. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the hurt and anger and fear and just fall back into partnership with him. But she couldn't quite bring herself to do it yet. I need time, she said. I need to see that you mean what you're saying, that you've really changed how you see all this. That's fair. He looked around the clinic again. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why the clinic? Why this specifically? Elena thought about how to answer that. Because I was sitting in that house we built, angry and hurt, and trying to figure out what I was doing with my life. And I realized that if you couldn't see past your pride to appreciate what we'd made, then maybe I needed to build something so undeniably good that even you couldn't argue with it. Something that would prove money used for the right reasons is worth celebrating, not resenting. And you thought a medical clinic would do that. I thought saving lives might get through to you, yes. He smiled slightly, the first real smile she'd seen since he came back. You know me pretty well. I'm learning. They stood there in the clinic waiting room, the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and Elena felt the first crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. Not a collapse? Not yet. But a possibility. A chance that maybe they could find their way back to each other after all. What happens now? Rowan asked. Now we go home. And tomorrow we talk about what comes next. Really talk, not just work around the hard stuff like we did before. I can do that? I want to do that. Good. Because I'm not going through this again. If we're going to be partners, real partners, then we need to figure out how to communicate when things get hard instead of you running off to prove something. Agreed. He held out his hand, formal and a little awkward. Partners? Elena looked at his outstretched hand, at his scarred fingers and hopeful eyes. Then she took it. Partners, but you're on probation. Fair enough. They rode back to the homestead as the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The silence between them was different now, not comfortable exactly, but not hostile either. More like the careful quiet of two people learning how to be around each other again after being apart. When they reached the house, Rowan stopped at the doorway. Should I take the barn? Give you space? Elena considered that. No. Take the guest room. We're under the same roof, but separate for now, until we figure this out properly. All right. She showed him to the room she'd prepared, and he looked around at the simple furniture, the clean sheets, the small touches that made it more than just a spare space. You kept a room ready for me, he said quietly. I hoped you'd come back. Even when I was furious at you, I hoped. He set his pack down and turned to face her. I'll do better, Elena. I promise. I'll work on the pride and the stubbornness and all of it. I want this to work. So do I. But wanting isn't enough. We have to actually do the work. I know. He paused. Thank you. for not giving up on me, on us. Elena nodded, not quite trusting her voice. She left him to settle in and went to her own room, closing the door behind her. She sat on the edge of her bed and let out a long, shaky breath. He was home. He'd apologized. He'd seen the clinic and understood, at least partially, what she'd been trying to show him. It was a start. Not a solution, not a happy ending, but a start. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. Morning came with the sound of Rowan moving around in the kitchen. Elena woke slowly, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar sounds in her house. Then she remembered. He was back. They were under the same roof again, though nothing was settled, nothing was certain. She dressed and went downstairs to find him making coffee, his movements careful in a space he'd helped build but never really lived in. He turned when he heard her, and the uncertainty on his face was so unlike him that it made her chest ache. "Morning," he said. "I hope it's all right that I started breakfast. I didn't want to presume, but I figured we both needed to eat." "It's fine." Elena moved to the stove where eggs were frying in a pan. "You remember where everything is?" "Some things. Had to search for the coffee." They worked around each other in the kitchen, not quite synchronized but not entirely awkward either. When they sat down to eat, the silence felt heavy with everything they needed to talk about. "So," Rowan said finally, setting down his fork, "you said we needed to talk. Really talk." Elena nodded. "We do. Because I need to understand what changed. 7 months ago, you couldn't live with taking my money. Yesterday, you saw I spent $4,000 more, and you didn't walk away. What's different?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I think it was about the 3rd month up north. I was working alongside this older man, Charlie. He'd been ranching his whole life, built up a decent spread, then lost it all in a drought 5 years back. He was working for wages just like me, starting over from nothing. What happened? One night around the campfire, he was talking about his place, how he'd built it with his own hands, every fence post, every barn beam, how he'd been so proud that he'd done it all himself, never borrowed money, never asked for help. And then the drought came, and he watched everything die because he was too stubborn to ask his neighbors for help with water rights, too proud to take a loan that could have saved his herd." Rowan met her eyes. He said pride kept him warm at night now, in his bedroll under someone else's sky. Said it was poor company. Elena felt something shift in her chest. "And that made you think about us?" "That made me realize I was doing the same thing, choosing pride over partnership, choosing to prove something to myself instead of building something with you." He pushed his eggs around his plate. "I spent 7 months working myself half to death to earn $600. In that same time, you built a clinic that's going to help thousands of people. The math isn't even close, Elena. My pride kept me from seeing what actually matters, which is what we build, what we create, what we leave behind." He looked up at her. "I was measuring worth in dollars earned through physical labor, but that's not the only way to contribute. It's not even the best way necessarily. Your money, used right, does more good than my bruised knuckles and aching back ever could." Elena set down her coffee cup carefully. "I need you to understand something. I don't think your work has no value. The house we built together, the fields you planted and tended, the knowledge you have about this land, that matters. That's real contribution. But it's not the only contribution. We both bring things to this partnership, and they don't have to be equal in dollar amounts to be equally valuable. I know that now, I do, but it's hard for me, Elena. I was raised to believe a man provides financially, that anything less makes him less than a man. Unlearning that," he shook his head, "it's going to take work. I'm going to have moments where the old thinking comes back, where I feel inadequate or defensive. I can't promise I'll be perfect about it. I don't need perfect, I need honest. When you're struggling with something, tell me instead of letting it build up until you explode or run away. Can you do that?" "I can try. I want to try." They finished breakfast in silence, then cleared the table together. Elena washed while Rowan dried, falling into an easy rhythm that felt both familiar and new. "What happens now?" Rowan asked, hanging up the dish towel. "With us, I mean. Do we just pick up where we left off, start over? What?" Elena leaned against the counter, considering. "I think we need to rebuild our partnership the same way we rebuilt the house, piece by piece, making sure each part is solid before we move to the next." That sounds reasonable. Where do we start? With honesty. Complete honesty about everything: money, feelings, plans, all of it. No more hiding things to protect each other's feelings or pride. Rowan nodded slowly. All right, then I'll start. I'm scared, Elena. I'm scared I'm going to mess this up again. Scared that I'm not capable of being the kind of partner you need. Scared that 7 months isn't enough time to really change the way I think about things. The admission hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Elena felt her throat tighten. My turn, she said. I'm scared too. I'm scared of trusting you again and having you leave. Scared that I've built my whole life around this homestead and this partnership, and if it falls apart, I won't have anything left. Scared that I'm asking too much, expecting you to change fundamental things about how you see yourself in the world. Are you? Asking too much? I don't know, maybe, but I also know I can't live the way we were before, walking on eggshells around your pride, hiding what I have and what I can do to make you feel better about yourself. That's not partnership, that's performance. Rowan moved to stand in front of her. You're right, and I don't want you to do that. I want you to be yourself, all of yourself, including the parts that challenge me or make me uncomfortable, because those are the parts that make me better. Elena searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or reservation. She found only determination and something that looked like hope. We should probably talk about the clinic, she said, about what it means going forward. What do you want it to mean? I want to stay involved, help with fundraising, work with Patterson on expansion plans. He's talking about bringing in a second doctor, maybe a dentist eventually. This could grow into something really significant. Then we should do that. Both of us, together. Rowan paused. I've been thinking about it since yesterday, about what I could contribute that's not just money or physical labor. I'm good with people, with organization. I could help coordinate volunteers, manage the building maintenance, handle the practical side of running a clinic. Elena felt hope flutter in her chest. You'd want to do that? I'd want to do something that matters. Something bigger than just our homestead. The clinic is that. And if we're both involved, then it's not you spending money while I watch. It's us building something together. Yes, that's exactly it. She smiled, the first real smile since he'd come back. That's what I was hoping you'd see. They spent the morning walking the property together, Rowan catching up on everything that had happened in his absence. Elena showed him the expanded garden, the improvements to the barn, the irrigation system she'd had installed with Thomas's help. He listened, asked questions, made suggestions. It felt almost like old times, but better, more open, more honest. That afternoon they rode into town together. Word had already spread that Rowan was back, and people watched them with undisguised curiosity. Elena could practically hear the gossip being generated. Would they stay together? Would he leave again? How had she handled 7 months alone? They stopped at the clinic, where Patterson was seeing patients. He looked up when they entered, his expression brightening. Rowan, welcome back. He shook hands firmly. Elena's told you about our little operation here? She has. It's impressive. Really impressive. All thanks to your partner here. She's been instrumental in every aspect of this project. Patterson glanced between them. I'm hoping she'll continue to be. We're looking at expansion possibilities. Actually, Rowan said, we were hoping to discuss that, both of us being involved going forward. Elena's obviously going to continue her work, but I was thinking I could contribute on the practical side. Maintenance, volunteer coordination, whatever needs doing. Patterson's smile widened. That would be excellent. We're already struggling to keep up with demand, and having someone to handle the logistics would be a tremendous help. Can you start right away? Soon as you need me. They spent an hour discussing plans and possibilities. Patterson introduced them to Sarah Whitmore, a young nurse who'd recently graduated and relocated from San Antonio to work at the clinic. She was sharp and capable, and she and Elena fell into easy conversation about medical supply logistics. Walking back through town afterward, Elena noticed Rowan was quieter than usual. What are you thinking? She asked. That I missed a lot while I was gone. The clinic, the connections you built, the life you created here. It's impressive, Elena. You didn't just survive, you thrived. I was angry. Angry energy had to go somewhere productive. Still, you built something real, and I almost threw away the chance to be part of it because of my own stubborn pride. They stopped in front of the general store. Mr. Gaines was out front, sweeping the porch. He looked up and nodded to them both. "Rowan, heard you were back." "Yes, sir. It's good to be home." "Glad to hear it. Miss Cross here kept things running smooth while you were gone. Real asset to the community." He glanced between them. "You two figuring things out?" "We're working on it," Elena said. "Good. That's good. Town needs more people willing to work through hard things instead of just cutting and running." He went back to sweeping, effectively ending the conversation. As they walked away, Rowan said quietly, "He's talking about my first wife. She left and never looked back. People around here have long memories." "Does that bother you?" "Used to. Now I figure they're not wrong. I did cut and run just like she did. Difference is I came back, and I'm not leaving again." That night, they made dinner together. A real meal, not just something thrown together. They worked well as a team, Elena realized. Always had, when Rowan wasn't sabotaging things with his pride. She chopped vegetables while he handled the meat. They timed everything so it all finished at once, and they sat down to eat as the sun set outside the windows. "This feels right," Rowan said, breaking a comfortable silence. "This, us, working together, talking, being in the same space." "It does," Elena agreed, "but we still have things to work through. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight." "I know, but we're making progress, aren't we?" "Yes, we are." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a new rhythm. Rowan threw himself into work at the clinic, and Elena was surprised by how good he was at it. He organized the volunteer schedule with military precision, handled building maintenance issues before they became problems, and somehow managed to charm donations out of people who'd never given before. He was good with people when he let himself be, she realized. All those years of keeping everyone at arm's length had hidden a natural leadership ability. They worked on the homestead too, of course. The fields needed tending. Animals needed care. The house needed the small, constant attention that any building requires. But now there was balance. Homestead work and clinic work, personal goals and community involvement. They were building something bigger than just their own survival. One evening in late June, they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. They developed a habit of ending each day like this, talking about what had happened and what needed doing tomorrow. Sometimes the conversations were deep, sometimes just practical. Tonight felt like it might be deep. "Can I ask you something?" Rowan said. "Of course. When I left, when everything fell apart, did you ever think about just cutting your losses? Finding someone else? Starting over somewhere new?" Elena considered lying, giving him the easy answer, but they'd promised honesty. "Yes, several times, especially in the first few weeks. I'd think about going to California, or maybe back east, starting completely fresh somewhere nobody knew me." "Why didn't you?" "Because this place matters to me. The house we built, the land, the community. And because..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because I'm not someone who gives up easily. Once I commit to something, I see it through, for better or worse. Even when the person you committed to ran away? Even then, though I was furious at you for making me prove that." He smiled slightly. "I'm sure you were." The smile faded. "I don't deserve you, Elena. Don't deserve your patience or your forgiveness or any of this." "Stop that." "Stop what?" "Stop deciding what you do or don't deserve. That's just pride in a different form, thinking you have to earn basic human connection through suffering or perfection. You're not perfect. Neither am I. We're both difficult, stubborn people trying to figure out how to build something together. That's enough." Rowan was quiet for a moment, then, "I love you. I don't know if I'm supposed to say it, if it's too soon or too complicated, but it's true. I love you." Elena's breath caught. They danced around feelings for months, acknowledged caring and mattering and missing each other, but neither of them had said the actual word. It hung in the air between them now, fragile and important. "I love you too," she said quietly. "Even when I was angry at you, even when I wanted to hate you for leaving, I loved you." "What do we do with that?" "I don't know. I've never been in love before. Not really. Neither have I. First marriage was practical, nothing more. This," he gestured between them, "this is different." "Yes, it is." They sat in silence, letting the confession settle. Love didn't fix everything, Elena knew. They still had work to do, trust to rebuild, patterns to break. But it was a foundation, something solid to build on. We should probably get married properly, Rowan said after a while. We told everyone we were engaged, but we never actually did anything about it. Is that a proposal? It's a practical observation, but if you want a proposal... He turned to face her, taking her hand. Elena Cross, will you marry me? For real this time, not just as a business arrangement, but as partners who love each other and are building a life together. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Yes, but I have conditions. He laughed softly. Of course you do. We write new vows, not the traditional ones, but something that actually reflects who we are and what we're building. And we don't do a big ceremony, just small, family and close friends. I can live with that. Any other conditions? You promise, really promise, that the next time things get hard or you start feeling inadequate, you talk to me instead of running away. I promise. And you promise to tell me when I'm being an idiot about pride before I do something stupid like leave for 7 months. Deal. She squeezed his hand. When should we do this? Soon. I don't want to wait anymore. Feels like we've waited long enough. They planned the wedding for mid-July, just 6 weeks away. Mrs. Carson was thrilled when they told her, immediately taking charge of organizing food and coordinating with the few people they wanted to invite. It would be at the Homestead, she declared, in the yard between the house and barn, simple and beautiful and perfect. The clinic held a small celebration when news spread of their engagement. Patients and volunteers congratulated them, Patterson made a speech about partnership and commitment, and Sarah Whitmore presented them with a hand-stitched quilt she'd somehow found time to make. It was chaotic and warm and everything Elena hadn't known she wanted. That night, as they cleaned up the clinic after the celebration, Rowan said, "You know what's strange? I spent my whole life thinking I needed to do everything alone, prove I could survive without help. And now, surrounded by all these people who care about us, working on projects that involve the whole community. This feels better than anything I've done alone ever did." That's called being human, Elena said. We're not meant to be isolated. We're better together. Took me long enough to figure that out. Better late than never. They spent the weeks before the wedding finishing projects around the homestead and the clinic. Rowan built a small addition to the clinic for storage, working alongside Thomas and Jimmy. Elena worked with Patterson on hiring another nurse and ordering additional equipment. Together they painted the trim on their house and planted more flowers in the garden. The night before the wedding, they honored an old tradition and stayed in separate houses. Elena at the homestead, Rowan at the Carsons. Mrs. Carson had insisted, saying even a practical couple deserved some romance. Elena lay in bed alone and thought about the journey that had brought her here. The burned homestead, the months of rebuilding, Rowan's departure, the clinic, his return. All of it had led to tomorrow. She wasn't nervous, she realized. She was certain. This was right. Not perfect, never perfect, but right. The wedding day dawned clear and warm. Mrs. Carson and her daughters descended on the homestead at dawn, setting up tables and chairs, stringing flowers, creating something beautiful from simple materials. Elena dressed in a new dress she'd had made, simple and practical but elegant in its way, cream-colored with embroidery at the collar and cuffs. The guests arrived by mid-morning. Thomas and his wife, Jimmy and his siblings, Mr. Gaines from the general store, Patterson and Sarah from the clinic, other neighbors who'd helped rebuild the homestead or supported the clinic. Maybe 30 people total, all of them invested in Elena and Rowan's success. Rowan arrived last, riding up on his horse wearing a new shirt and looking nervous in a way Elena found endearing. He dismounted and came to stand beside her, and they faced Patterson, who'd agreed to officiate. "We're gathered here," Patterson said, "to witness something remarkable. Two people who found each other in the worst circumstances, who built something from nothing, who fell apart and came back together. That's not a fairy tale, that's real life, that's the hard work of commitment." Elena had written their vows, and Rowan read his first, his voice steady, despite the emotion behind it. "Elena, I promise to see you clearly, all of you. Not just the parts that are easy or comfortable. I promise to talk instead of running, to trust instead of defending, to build with you instead of trying to prove I can do it alone. I promise to love you not just in the good times, but in the hard times too. And I promise that this homestead, this life, this future, it's ours, built together, equal partners in everything that matters." Elena's voice trembled slightly as she read hers. "Rowan, I promise to challenge you when you need it and support you always. I promise to use whatever resources I have to build things that matter and to include you in that building. I promise to see your worth not in what you earn or what you can physically do, but in who you are and how you stand beside me. I promise to love you stubbornly, even when you're being difficult, because we're both difficult, and that's part of why this works." Patterson smiled. "Do you both commit to this partnership, this marriage, this life together?" "I do," they said in unison. "Then by the authority invested in me by the state of Texas, and by this community that supports you, I pronounce you married. You may kiss your wife, Rowan." He did, gentle and careful, like something precious. The guests cheered, and someone started playing a fiddle, and the celebration began. They ate food prepared by the whole community: roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables from everyone's gardens, pies and cakes in abundance. They danced in the yard as the sun set, Elena's hand in Rowan's, both of them laughing when they stumbled because neither was particularly graceful. They talked with guests, accepted congratulations, felt the warmth of community support wrapping around them like a blanket. As the party wound down and guests started heading home, Mrs. Carson pulled Elena aside. "You did good, child. Both of you did good. Thank you for everything. You've been like family, I hope, because that's what you are to us now." After everyone left, Elena and Rowan stood in the yard surveying the aftermath. Tables to be put away, dishes to be washed, general cleanup. But that could wait until morning. "Come on," Rowan said, taking her hand. "Let's go inside, our house, our home." They walked through the door together, and this time it felt different. Not just a building they'd constructed, but a home they'd created together. A foundation they'd poured with sweat and stubbornness, and eventually love. That night, lying in bed together for the first time, Elena said, "We're going to fight sometimes. We're both too stubborn not to." "I know," Rowan replied, his arm around her. "But we'll figure it out. We're good at that." "Are we? We made it this far, didn't we? Through fire and pride and 7 months apart. If we can survive all that, we can survive disagreements over crop rotation or clinic expansion plans." Elena laughed. "That's a very practical view of marriage. We're practical people." "Yes, we are." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the house solid around them, and the future spreading out full of possibility. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were good. The clinic expanded twice, eventually adding a second doctor and a dentist, just as Patterson had dreamed. Rowan became the clinic's operations manager, handling everything from building maintenance to volunteer coordination to supply ordering. Elena continued her fundraising work and eventually started a scholarship fund for young people from the area who wanted to pursue medical training. The homestead thrived too. They added acreage, diversified crops, built a second barn. They hired help during busy seasons, paying fair wages and treating workers with respect. The property that had been a burned-out ruin became one of the most productive in the region. Their partnership wasn't always smooth. Rowan had moments when old insecurities surfaced, when he struggled with accepting help or felt diminished by Elena's resources. But he'd learned to voice those feelings instead of letting them fester. And Elena had learned to push back when needed, but also to acknowledge his contributions more explicitly, to remind him that value came in many forms. They fought sometimes, about money, about priorities, about the stubborn differences in how they saw the world, but they'd learned to fight fairly, to argue without cruelty, to find compromise without one person always giving in to the other. 3 years after they married, Elena found out she was pregnant. She told Rowan one evening while they were working in the garden, and he'd dropped his trowel and just stared at her. "Are you sure?" Patterson confirmed it this morning. "We're having a baby." "Yes. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a mother. We'll figure it out together." They had a daughter, born the following spring, with Elena's dark hair and Rowan's blue eyes. They named her Margaret, after Elena's mother. She was colicky and demanding, and neither of them had any idea what they were doing at first. But they learned, the same way they'd learned everything else. Together, through trial and error and stubborn determination. 2 years later came a son, Thomas, named after the man who'd helped build their first house. He was easier, or maybe they were just more experienced. Either way, the homestead filled with the sound of children laughing and playing, and Elena sometimes stood at her kitchen window watching Rowan teach them to feed the chickens or milk the cow, and thought about how far they'd come from that first awful day when she'd arrived to find nothing but ash and a man who'd wanted her to leave. The clinic continued to grow. By their 10th anniversary, it was serving 12 communities and had become a regional medical center. Patterson had retired, training his replacement personally. Sarah Whitmore had married and stayed in Harlo's Pass, becoming the head nurse and Patterson's eventual successor as clinic director. The scholarship fund had sent 15 young people to medical school or nursing programs. On their 20th anniversary, Elena and Rowan stood at the same spot where they'd gotten married, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Their children were grown now, Margaret training to be a doctor in Austin, Thomas working the homestead alongside his father and preparing to take it over eventually. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Rowan said, his arm around her waist. "What?" "That day you arrived. How I told you to leave, that there was nothing here for you." "I remember. You were very determined to be miserable alone." "I was an idiot." "Yes, you were. But you got better." He laughed. "Thanks to you. Thanks to us. We did this together, Rowan. All of it." They stood in silence, watching the light fade. The house behind them had been added onto over the years, more rooms for children than grandchildren when they visited. A proper library because Elena had always wanted one. A workshop for Rowan's carpentry projects. The barn had been rebuilt again after a storm damaged it, bigger and better. The field stretched out in every direction, productive and well-maintained. But the real legacy wasn't the buildings or the land. It was the clinic, still serving thousands. It was the scholarship recipients who came back to practice in rural areas that needed them. It was the example they'd set. That partnership meant working together, contributing what you could, building something bigger than yourself. "We did good," Rowan said quietly. "Yes," Elena agreed. "We really did." The sun finally set completely, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow there would be more work. There was always more work. Fields to tend, fence to mend, clinic board meetings to attend, grandchildren to spoil. The work never ended. But tonight, they stood together in the yard where they'd married 20 years ago, two people who'd built a life from ash and stubbornness and eventually love. Two people who'd learned that worth wasn't measured in dollars earned or pride protected, but in what you built and who you built it with. The house stood solid behind them, lights glowing in the windows. Inside were photographs of children and grandchildren, of clinic groundbreakings and harvest celebrations, of a life well lived together. Outside were fields they'd planted and structures they'd built, and a community they'd helped strengthen. From ruin, they'd created something that would outlast them both. A homestead that would pass to their children. A clinic that would serve generations. A partnership that had weathered pride and pain and separation and come out stronger on the other side. Elena leaned into Rowan's embrace, feeling his steady heartbeat, the warmth of his body, the solid presence of a man who'd learned to stand beside her instead of alone. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, a gesture as natural now as breathing. "Ready to go in?" he asked. "In a minute. Let's stay here a little longer." So they did. Two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and chosen, every day since, to keep building something better. Not perfect, nothing ever was, but real and solid and true. And in the end, that was more than enough.